Search goes on in San Francisco for the man known as the Zodiac Killer. The elements involved today included psychiatrists, astrologists, and police guards for school buses.
Someone left a message over 50 years ago, and no one's been able to read it. Not cops, codebreakers, or even the FBI has managed it. It came from a man who killed just for fun, and then dared the world to catch him. He called himself the Zodiac, and some of his twisted codes have been cracked, but the final ones are still locked tight. Until now. Artificial intelligence is starting to see patterns no human ever could. And what it's beginning to uncover is horrifying. What if the Zodiac's secret message has been hiding a confession or a final threat? Brace yourself, because the Zodiac's most horrifying message might finally be coming to light. And it's more twisted than you could ever imagine. Who was the Zodiac Killer? The late 1960s was a time of peace marches, classic rock, and people driving around in cool muscle cars. But the good vibes wasn't all that was happening at the time, because something dark was brewing in Northern California. A mysterious figure began stalking couples on quiet roads, and he would soon become one of the most famous serial killers in American history. He called himself the Zodiac. We still don't know who he was. To this day, no one has been arrested or charged for the Zodiac crimes. But we do know what he did, and it was terrifying. The Zodiac Killer is believed to have murdered at least 5 people between 1968 and 1969. Some experts think he may have killed many more. But what made him different from most killers was how he wanted to be known. He didn't just commit murders and vanish. He sent letters, taunted the police, and dared them to catch him. He was crazy for the spotlight. It all started on a cold night just a few days before Christmas in 1968. High school students David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were out on a date. They parked on a quiet road near Vallejo, California. It was the kind of place teens went to hang out or talk privately. But on this night, something awful happened. Someone pulled up next to them, got out of their car and walked over. He fired a gun and shot both teenagers, and David was killed with a single shot to the head, while Betty Lou was shot 5 times in the back as she tried to run. No one saw the killer, nor knew who he was. There were no strong leads, and sadly, it wouldn't be the last time he struck. Fast forward to July 4th, 1969. While people were out enjoying the holiday, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Maho were parked at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, not far from the first murder scene. Suddenly, a car pulled up behind them. The driver got out with a flashlight and approached the window. Without warning, he opened fire with a 9mm handgun. Darlene was shot and later died. Michael was shot too, but somehow he survived. He described the attacker as a heavy-set white man, around 5 feet 8 inches, wearing dark clothes. But it wasn't much to go on. Then, something even more crazy happened. About 40 minutes after the shooting, someone called the police from a nearby payphone. The man calmly said, "I want to report a double murder. If you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway, you'll find kids in a brown car. They've been shot by a 9mm. I also killed those kids last year." It was the Zodiac, calling in his own crime. Not long after that, the killer sent a letter to local newspapers. Inside was a message written in code and signed with a strange symbol, a circle with a cross through it. At the bottom, he signed it. "This is the Zodiac speaking." That was the first time he used that name, but it wouldn't be the last. Just a couple of months later, in September 1969, the Zodiac struck again, this time at Lake Berryessa in Napa County. College students Brian Hartnell A.E. and Cecilia Shepard were enjoying a peaceful afternoon by the lake. Suddenly, they noticed a man walking toward them. He was wearing a strange black outfit, almost like an executioner's hood. On his chest was the same circle and cross symbol from the letters. He pulled out a knife and tied them up. He claimed he had escaped from prison and needed a car and money. Then, out of nowhere, he stabbed both of them. Brian was stabbed 6 times. Cecilia was stabbed 10 times. Afterward, the Zodiac casually walked up to Brian's car and used a marker to write the date, time, weapon used, and the word Zodiac on the door, almost like a signature. Cecilia later died from her wounds, but Brian survived and gave the police a detailed description. It helped, but the killer vanished once again. By now, fear was spreading fast. The Zodiac was all over the news. People were locking their doors, schools were on alert, and parents were afraid to let their kids walk home alone. But the terror wasn't over. On October 11, 1969, the Zodiac killed again. This time, in the heart of San Francisco. He called a cab near Union Square. The driver, Paul Stein, picked him up and drove him to a wealthy neighborhood called Presidio Heights. But when they reached the destination, the man shot Paul in the head and stole his wallet, keys, and even ripped off part of his shirt. This time, there were actual witnesses. Several teenagers saw the killer get out of the cab and described him to police. But again, things went haywire. The thing is, the police were mistakenly told to look for a black male suspect, even though the witnesses clearly said he was white. That miscommunication may have helped the Zodiac slip away. And, as if to mock them, the Zodiac later mailed in a piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt, proving it was him. Over time, other possible victims were linked to the Zodiac. There was the murder of Cherry Joe Bates in Riverside, or the disappearance of Donna Lass in South Lake Tahoe. But investigators never found enough proof to confirm they were Zodiac-related. Still, in one of his letters, the Zodiac bragged that he had killed 37 people, and whether that number was real or not, no one really knows. So why was he so hard to catch? How did he manage to elude the police time and time again, even when it seemed like he wasn't even trying to hide? The thing is, the Zodiac was smart, careful, and always seemed to be one step ahead. He didn't always leave fingerprints. He used different weapons. He struck in different cities. He sent coded letters to the press that teased the police and threatened more killings. One of his most disturbing claims was that he planned to plant bombs at school buses. He clearly enjoyed playing with fear and attention, like it was all some kind of twisted game. And then, there were the cryptic clues or puzzles he left behind that have continued to haunt investigators for decades. The Zodiac Codes. The Zodiac Killer turned murdering people into a sick little game. While most killers try to stay hidden, this one practically begged to be noticed. He wrote taunting letters to the media and police, bragging about his crimes, threatening more, and most famously, sending cryptic codes. These codes were carefully constructed ciphers that were full of letters, numbers, and strange symbols. Some were solved, but others remain a mystery to this day. It all started on August 1, 1969, when 3 major newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, each received nearly identical letters. The Zodiac claimed responsibility for the recent murders, and inside each envelope, he included 1/3 of a mysterious cipher. Together, they formed a 408-character code. The Zodiac dared the papers to publish the ciphers and warned that if they didn't, more people would die. So the newspapers gave in and printed them. While police and experts tried to crack the code, it was actually a high school teacher named Donald Hardin and his wife Betty who figured it out just a week later. Sitting in their home in Salinas, California, the couple tackled the puzzle like a weekend brain teaser. Donald was a history and economics teacher, and Betty had a strong interest in psychology and cryptography. They believed the Zodiac might have used simple patterns and repeated phrases, possibly starting with something personal or obvious. Their first big breakthrough was basically a guess. They thought, what if the killer used the word kill a lot in his message? It's a common word for someone obsessed with murder. Betty thought that the killer might start his message with something dramatic like, "I like killing people." So they looked for a repeated pattern of symbols that could match those words. And sure enough, they found symbols that seemed to appear over and over, which matched the length and structure of the phrase. From there, they began matching symbols to letters, one at a time. Every time a symbol was matched to a letter in one word, they applied it to the rest of the cipher. That helped them spot other words, like because, people, and fun. They used logic, word patterns, and their knowledge of English to fill in the blanks. It was like solving a giant crossword puzzle, with each solved word opening up more of the message. Slowly but surely, the chilling text began to appear. The final decrypted message read, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrill. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and all the I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife." The message was terrifying. Spelling mistakes aside, it gave a clear look into the mind of a killer who saw murder as a game, and even as a spiritual mission. But regardless of the shocking content, the message didn't help the police catch him. And then it got stranger. In November of that same year, the Zodiac sent a new cipher. This time, it was a shorter one with 340 characters. It became known as the 340 cipher, or Z340. This time, no one could crack it. Cryptographers, amateur codebreakers, and even intelligence agencies like the FBI tried and failed. The symbols didn't follow the same kind of pattern as before, and there was no obvious phrase like, "I like killing." For decades, it was one of the most frustrating unsolved puzzles in criminal history. People tried everything. They looked at letter frequencies, tried solving it like a substitution cipher, played around with grid layouts, and even looked for clues in the Zodiac's other letters. But nothing worked. The code didn't seem to make sense until, over 51 years later, it finally broke. In December 2020, the infamous Z340 cipher was finally cracked by a trio of amateur codebreakers working from different parts of the world. David Oranchak, a software developer and cipher enthusiast from Virginia, had been obsessed with the Zodiac ciphers for over a decade. He teamed up with Jarl van Eyck, a Belgian warehouse operator and expert in code-solving software, and Sam Blake, an Australian mathematician with a background in applied statistics. They decided to take a fresh approach. The 340-character cipher had long baffled people because it didn't work like a standard left-to-right substitution code. The team suspected that the Zodiac used a type of transposition cipher, where letters are rearranged in a certain pattern. Van Eyck's software was key because it allowed them to test hundreds of thousands of possible grid shapes, diagonal patterns, and reading directions. Eventually, they hit on a method that worked. The cipher had been written using a diagonal reading pattern, going down and across, and involved splitting the message into blocks that had been rearranged. After aligning the characters properly, the message began to take shape. Bit by bit, words formed. Here's what the decrypted message said. I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me that wasn't me on the TV show, which brings up a point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner because I now have enough slaves to work for me. Once again, the message was dark and mocking. It referred to a TV interview where someone had claimed to be the Zodiac, which he denied had been him. But just like with the first cipher, there was no name, address, and no real clue that could catch him. Just the same eerie belief that his victims would become his slaves in the afterlife. Still, solving the cipher was a huge moment. After decades of silence, it proved that the codes weren't just gibberish. They had structure, meaning, and with enough effort and the right tools, they could be unlocked. Because if 2 ciphers were solvable, then maybe the remaining ones could be too. And maybe, just maybe, someone or something could figure them out. Why AI could help crack the rest. For a long time, humans did all the heavy lifting. People like Donald and Betty Hardin and the trio who cracked Z340 spent hours, months, even years analyzing symbols, testing ideas, and chasing patterns. But today, we have a new kind of brain in the mix. It's fast, it doesn't get tired, and it's starting to think like us. Sometimes even better. We're talking about artificial intelligence. AI is no longer science fiction. In simple terms, artificial intelligence is when machines are programmed to think and learn in a way that mimics human intelligence. It's like giving a computer the ability to reason, understand, and solve problems. One powerful area of AI is called machine learning. This is when a computer gets better at a task by analyzing more and more data, kind of like how people learn from experience. If you showed a machine 1,000 examples of dogs, eventually it would start to recognize a dog on its own, even if it had never seen that particular one before. Then there's deep learning, which is a more advanced type of machine learning. It uses layered systems called neural networks that mimic the human brain. These systems can recognize speech, translate languages, and even write music. They're also great at picking up patterns that might be invisible to the human eye. Another important field is natural language processing, or NLP. This is how AI understands human language. Think about autocorrect on your phone, or how Google finishes your sentences for you. That's NLP in action. So, how does any of this help us with Zodiac's remaining ciphers? To start, AI is really good at pattern recognition. Much better than humans in some cases. It can sift through billions of possible combinations in seconds, spot repeated structures, and test out decryption methods that would take humans days or weeks. It doesn't need to sleep, it doesn't get bored, and it doesn't second-guess itself. For a puzzle as tricky and stubborn as the Zodiac's unsolved codes, that kind of thing could be a game-changer. For instance, there have even been AI programs trained specifically for cracking substitution ciphers, just like Zodiac's. These systems work by learning how language behaves. For instance, they know that in English, certain letters like E and T appear more often than others. They also know that some words usually come together, like I am or to thee. Using that knowledge, AI can match symbols to letters, test phrases, and build out possible messages much faster than any person could. But the tricky part is that Zodiac's remaining codes are more than just letter swaps. He may have used more complex tricks like transposition, where letters are moved around, or even invented symbols and hidden messages. That makes things tougher, but thankfully, not impossible. Because AI has proven useful in bringing closure to some of the most mind-blowing cases in human history. AI solves other cold cases. Over the past few years, artificial intelligence has stepped into the world of crime solving in ways we never thought were possible. Cases that had been unsolved for decades are now being reopened, and sometimes even closed, thanks to the sharp eyes and fast thinking of machines. And while AI isn't some magical crime-fighting robot, it's become an amazing tool that's giving investigators new hope in old, forgotten cases. Let's start with one of the most famous examples: the Golden State Killer. For years, he terrorized California in the 70s and 80s, where he committed at least 13 murders, 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries. Then, for decades, nothing happened. There were no arrests or any real suspects. No one saw or heard anything useful that could be reported. But that all changed in 2018 when law enforcement used a combination of DNA analysis and genealogy websites to find a match. But this wasn't your typical family tree search. It involved massive data processing, pattern recognition, and advanced algorithms, which are exactly the kind of work AI is built for. Investigators uploaded DNA from the crime scenes into a public genealogy database. Then, an AI-assisted system combed through thousands of potential relatives, building out massive family trees, eliminating suspects, and narrowing in on people who might match. It didn't take long before they found someone who fit: a former police officer named Joseph James D'Angelo. He was arrested, charged, and eventually confessed to many of the crimes. Without AI, that kind of data crunching might have taken years, maybe decades, if it ever happened at all. And that's just one case. Around the world, AI is being used in similar ways. In some cases, it's helping to match fingerprints, compare facial features in blurry photos, or detect small voice patterns in old recordings. In others, it's being trained to spot behaviors like movement patterns or writing styles that might link crimes across different locations and time periods. One amazing example comes from the world of ancient history. Believe it or not, AI has been used to help decode lost languages and scripts, like Linear B, an ancient Greek writing system that baffled historians for decades. AI didn't solve it completely on its own, but it made huge leaps by comparing known words, recognizing repeating symbols, and matching patterns, which are things that were nearly impossible for a single human mind to process all at once. It's the same kind of thinking that could be used on the Zodiac's ciphers. What if AI could detect something the eye can't, like the way Zodiac formed certain letters or how often he used certain phrases? Maybe there's a hidden rhythm or a buried code inside his handwriting that no one's noticed before. Maybe it's not even about the symbols at all, but about the spacing between them or the way they're arranged. Another wonderful use of AI comes from analyzing crime scene data. Police departments are starting to use predictive models that can detect patterns across years of case files. For instance, if two crimes happened in different cities but share similar weapons, time frames, or victim types, AI can make that connection instantly, even if the crimes happened 10 years apart. In the past, that kind of link might never have been made. There's even a case where AI helped identify a serial killer who had gone unnoticed for years because his crimes were spread out and looked unrelated. But once the data was all entered into a system, the pattern popped out like a blinding sign. So, it's obvious that the progress AI is making is undeniable. Every year, new breakthroughs are being made. Cases that were thought to be unsolvable are being reopened. Families are finally getting answers, and justice is being served, sometimes decades after the fact. So, could the Zodiac Killer's secrets be next? Could AI really crack Zodiac's final codes? We've seen what artificial intelligence is capable of. We've seen how it helps identify long-lost criminals, interpret forgotten languages, and even find links between events that look unrelated on the surface. But when it comes to the Zodiac's final ciphers, especially the mysterious Z13 and Z32, can machines really go where decades of human effort have failed? Well, let's look at what we're working with. First, the Z13 cipher. This one is short and has just 13 symbols. Zodiac sent it to the San Francisco Chronicle in April 1970, alongside a letter that read, "My name is," followed by the cipher. Naturally, people believed this might be his true identity hidden in code. But with only 13 characters, that's a puzzle with millions of possible combinations. Then there's the Z32. It came with a letter to the police, warning them to stop a bomb he'd supposedly planted. The cipher was 32 symbols long, and the Zodiac claimed it would reveal the bomb's location. But again, no one has cracked it, and no bomb was ever found. These aren't big puzzles, size-wise, but that's what makes them so tough. With fewer clues to work from, it's harder to guess patterns. It's like trying to finish a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing and no picture on the box. Still, AI might have an advantage here. Unlike humans, AI doesn't get tired or frustrated. It doesn't assume or second-guess. It can run through endless possibilities, testing every potential shift, symbol swap, or language structure until something finally clicks. And with the power of deep learning, AI can be trained to understand human language, tone, and even writing habits, to learning to think like the Zodiac did. Some researchers are already giving it a shot. In recent years, programmers have built AI models specifically trained on cryptography and code breaking. These models study known ciphers like the famous Z408 and Z340, learning how humans solved them, then applying those lessons to the unsolved ones. Some AI projects even use neural networks that try to recreate Zodiac's writing style, as if the machine were trying to become the killer's digital twin. But the tricky part is that to solve these ciphers, AI needs to know what it's looking for. That means making some educated guesses. Is the Zodiac using a simple substitution, a homophonic code? Is he referencing a book, like The Mikado, or The Most Dangerous Game, both of which he mentioned in letters? Is he playing word games or using obscure references? The truth is, we don't know. That's where natural language processing, NLP, could be very, very useful. NLP allows AI to study writing and understand how words and phrases are typically used. So if Zodiac's final message includes something like, "My name is," followed by a clever twist or pun, NLP could help the system recognize it. The AI wouldn't just test random names, it would look for names that fit the killer's style, tone, and vocabulary. There's also an interest in training AI on Zodiac-specific patterns. That means feeding it everything the killer ever wrote, like his letters, phrases, threats, misspellings, slang, and letting the system learn what made his writing unique. Then, using that knowledge, the AI can scan through the unsolved codes and point out symbol combinations that match his usual language. In fact, this kind of work is already happening. Some hobbyist teams have built AI programs that scan Zodiac's ciphers against databases of names, locations, and phrases from the 60s. They're trying to see what pops up, both statistically but stylistically. They want to know what feels like Zodiac, even if it doesn't solve the code in the traditional sense. But we can't help but ask, if AI does crack one of the final ciphers, what might it actually say? Some people believe the Z13 will finally reveal his real name. Maybe it's been hiding in plain sight all along. Maybe the symbols translate to something like Gary Post, which was a man whose name gained attention online after a team of investigators suggested he could be the Zodiac. But so far, no official link has been confirmed. Still, if the name pops out of the cipher using AI, that would be huge. Others think the codes might contain taunts or personal messages. We all know that Zodiac loved attention. Some say he wanted to be a celebrity killer, like Jack the Ripper, so maybe the final ciphers are just one last way of showing off. Something like, "You'll never catch me," or "I've been watching you." At this point, we can't put it past him. There's even a chance that the final codes might describe a crime that was never linked to Zodiac. Maybe a murder he committed before his first confirmed killing. Or maybe one that happened later that only he knew about. Or even annoyingly, it could be the theory that the message is a manifesto. A disturbing and philosophical manifesto that is so in line with what the killer could do. Zodiac liked to reference plays, movies, and ideas about life and death. What if his final message wasn't a name or a threat, but a belief? A belief he could have chosen to share with his wrong spellings and self-righteous ramblings. Something like, "Killing is my purpose," or "I am death." But maybe, just maybe, the ciphers say nothing. Maybe they were a trick or distraction, a way he could send people chasing after clues that don't exist. Some experts have even suggested that the Z13 might not be a cipher at all, but just some gibberish the Zodiac threw together to keep the public hooked. Which is honestly not far-fetched, because we know how he liked to keep the public talking. Still, whatever the ciphers may contain, AI could be what we need to decipher their meaning. And then, the decades-long case can finally be put to rest. Do you think the Zodiac Killer's final message was always meant for the future to solve? Could AI be the tool that finally exposes the truth he tried to bury? And if that message really is as horrifying as we fear, what do you think it says? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.